Great.
Okay. And so should I just share my screen?
Yeah,
See if
you
it comes.
should be able to.
Yeah, let's see. I think this one. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Hmm.
So I'll be going over lessons learned from our initial testing and plans moving forward. Um, so for anyone that doesn't remember or know, we did initial testing for the Sapphire's control system, just using the core components, which are the central hub, the outdoor unit, and then instead of the pressurization system, we just tested it using a portable filter, just for means of getting into homes quickly and easily. And then we distributed 4 units. I took one of them, 4 were distributed, and then 1 came back. So it really ended up being 3 units. So
When came back, was it not working?
I think Naomi returned hers. It wasn't working, and I don't think she was interested in taking it back. And so we still have it in the lab, but it we set it back up in the lab. So, but yeah. Um, And the goals of this initial test were to stress test the system, make sure we find any errors like we did encounter, and then get interaction data, find out how many events would occur, and then gather feedback from users. There were a couple things we learned. One big thing was the communication to the users was not what it should have been. Um, and then we also had an issue of high temperature readings, which we already knew about going into this, and this was also not communicated properly to the users. And then, yeah, and then how to interpret dashboard values. So one of the issues that came up was with the users conducting the bag test, which was to light a match and drop it in the bag with the outdoor air sensor in the bag. This would force an event to occur just so the user could make sure that the fan or the filter was connected. And an issue we ran into was the users conducted this test and then the filter did not turn on, or it didn't turn on right away like they expected it to. So this was did not mean to, or we should have put this in a communication that there's a response time with the system. So the system is supposed to wait 20 minutes of having elevated uh, PM concentration so that we ensure that it doesn't just turn on and off for short duration events. And if you look in the figures in the bottom of this slide the one on the left is using if we just turned on the filter just based on a threshold, just a set threshold, and you can see it turns on those really quick short blips, which we don't want it to do. And then the one on the right is with the waiting period, and you can see it only turns on for that longer event, which is what we want. So, and then high
Can I
temperature.
jump in real quick?
Yeah.
So I don't want to jump into this in depth now, but I do think this is one that we should revisit at some point. This is something that we had a conversation on kind of early on as a group. We're like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Of course, we don't want this thing turning on and off, on and off, on and off. And so that's the way that we've programmed the algorithm. I do think there are some of these things that were um, good decisions or well thought out decisions a year ago. And as we have refined our plans going out to the home, we should revisit some of those assumptions. So I think you'll hit several of those as we go throughout this kind of update. And several of them are things that we got feedback on of, well, it did exactly what we told it to do, but it's not what people were expecting it to do. And so that either means we have to do better job on communication, or we have to revisit what we tell the code to do. So we'll put a pin in that for now, but just a note for us to revisit that conversation at some point.
Does anyone have any other questions at this point? Okay. Yeah, high temperature readings. This is something we knew going into this. I did not communicate this into the handout, but basically what's happening is there's heat generated inside the cases from the microprocessor and other electronics. And so then the temperature reading is much higher than the actual ambient surroundings. And so to prevent this, we're going to put a fan inside the cases. We've just designed the cases, but have not tested them yet, which we're doing currently. So we're hoping that will bring down the readings to actual ambient surroundings. So. And then another issue is PM values sometimes showing 0. And part of this is because when the sensor reads below 1, in between 0 and 1, the dashboard then displays it and rounds down to 0. And part of the reason why these values are so low is we're using the Sensirion SPS 30, and it's already known that it does poorly at these low values. And so we've already done accuracy testing of the SPS 30s in the housings, and was verified against lab grade instrumentation. But we do know that it struggles in the lower values of 0 to 3 or so. And so one thing we can do is change the dashboard to display something else besides the actual number. One thing we do is just show that it's just low and just put that there, or put like less than 3 or something. But that's open to discussion. So, and then one other thing that occurred, and this I think was the issue with your unit, Naomi, is there was an error in the programming. So one of the scripts never ran, which was responsible for telling the system that there is an event occurring, and telling the filter to turn on. And what happened was, during my testing, I commented this line of code out, which means it won't do anything. And just for testing purposes, before I distribute it to make sure that everything was good, what ended up happening was I didn't uncomment this line of code. And but to address this in the instructions, we'll just have to be very clear and have a clear reminder to tell the person setting it up or building the systems that they need to make sure to uncomment this line before the unit is deployed. So another thing that was found is Will's house had I wouldn't say few events, but it was more like short events. He had 9 total events over the month-and-a-half period that it was in his house so far, and which is actually more than we previously had expected. So we did I think in the fall did some predictions on how many events we would see in Fort Collins, and that came to around 6 events in the same time period that this unit was in Will's house. So we're actually above that expectation. The only thing is the events were shorter than expected. The average duration was only an hour, and previously in the fall, we predicted an average event duration of a little over a day and a half. So that is quite a bit smaller that we found. So, but the outdoor concentration was pretty low, pretty clean. It was only like 4.13 So during that time, but and this goes back to changing possible or changing prediction parameters to force more events. We can adjust different parameters in the algorithm to have it either respond more, respond for a longer period of time. And these are things we can play with just to ensure that we get the amount and duration of events that we want. So
One thing there, just I told you I'd give you this, Carson, and I forgot, but so that 4.3 that or 4.13 that you averaged there, the average at CSU facilities in April, which is kind of where the bulk of that time has been, was 5 micrograms. So we're actually pretty close between the two sites. So good or bad, depending which way you look at it. Our test case period has been a pretty clean time period. So
does anyone have any questions at this point or inputs?
I think it would be good to have a team discussion about what we think an event looks like now that we have some experience. And I think this will follow on the discussion about what questions are we asking.
Were the events indoor or outdoor events?
They're outdoor.
Oh, okay.
You know what?
Yeah, there was definitely indoor events. I'm guessing from like cooking and stuff, but no, this is based on outdoor. So
Am I
Uh,
correct that it does not respond to indoor?
yeah, just outdoor.
Yeah, so if you burn something like I did, then and then you would have a high indoor concentration and then it would not respond.
No, just outdoor. Another thing is the dashboard currently shows it labels it as AQI on the dashboard, but this is really actually just PM 2.5 concentration. And so I think that's because one thing I thought about when I was doing it is AQI is definitely more familiar to people. But I think PM labeling it PM would look weird, but it's also misleading to necessarily to say it's AQI and it's really PM. So I think this is something we should probably revisit and decide on. So what went well from this test was the data extraction went as intended, except for the corrupted file that we just encountered. But we're not really sure where the actual issue is with that. I'm not sure if the file on the system itself is corrupted or it happened in the transfer between you and I, Tammy. Not sure yet. So I'm not sure if that's a real issue yet, but and the other thing is there was no gaps in the data at Will's house. It was constantly all outdoor and indoor is recorded from during that month and a half period or so. And so yeah. And then there it says indoor events, that should say outdoor. There were outdoor events captured. And then we also had dashboard interaction captured. So I was able to see if Will went to the historical page and back to the main page, and then as well as pressing the fan off and fan on button. So okay. And then what is next from this point on? So we'll put a dashboard in Dr. Larange's office, and he'll frequently press different buttons just to test out and gather further interaction data. And then we also need to test the new design cases with the implemented fans to make sure that that is reducing the temperature readings down to the actual ambient surroundings. And then the next thing is a unit will be placed in the coal hopper on top of the powerhouse for a long duration of time. And this will just give us further insight and stress test the system further. And if there are any other issues, then we can fix those. And then the instructions will be revised as well, just so that the bag or the information of the waiting period is explained, and then as well as the errors in the programming. So yeah, I think that's all I have. That was kind of quick. Does anyone have any questions or?
A couple big, kind of high level thoughts and some kind of additions later. I think as people know, Carson has gotten a fairly competitive Woodward internships. Taking some time away from the group this summer, but we've done a transition meeting. So some of the other team members from my group will be taking over the assembly building of units and those pieces. So we have a plan there already for continuity during the summer. We do have some additional units if you want to put more. If anyone wants additional units to keep testing. A couple things that came to mind, kind of big picture that I think we should revisit in addition to the what constitutes an event and all of that. I know we weren't originally planning on doing anything with indoor events, but I feel a little weird having an indoor fan that people don't have an ability to manually turn on, and there being indoor events. So I don't know how we want to deal with that and how that messes up our study design, but I think it's one that we may want to revisit at some point. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Carson, but when it's in the automated mode, right now there's only the ability to turn off the device when it is autonomously turned on.
Yeah.
There's no way to turn it on
No.
your own, right?
Yeah, it's just when you turn it on in the automated mode, it's just telling the system that it can turn it on itself. So
Yeah. So it kind of opens up a weird complication of all of our different options, but for the portable filter, it seems weird not to provide people that ability to use a filter in their home. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of ideas came up that probably would not have come up if I didn't have that experience. Like my interaction with it was different from how I thought I would interact with it, which is what happens, right? So I have one question. I sent this to you folks. Is this a good time to ask? Maybe we should see everybody who's got questions or thoughts about it. Like anyone else want to speak?
I had one.
Will you? Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
So Carson, I think you covered a lot of different aspects of what you learned. One thing that seemed to come up a couple of places is this idea of what you have summarized here, revising the instructions to address questions that people have.
Yeah.
And while I think that there's lot of good reason to go back and revise instructions based on what you learned from people's experience. One thing that I don't quite know how to address is that putting it all into an instruction manual requires recall at the right time when the person wants the information. And if it's not the kind of information that they are familiar with, their ability to actually recall it from your instructions is still a barrier to them knowing what they want to know when they want to know it. And I'm not saying that that means don't revise the instructions. I just kind of wanted to note this experience I've had where we continually revise instructions to address things that come up, but it doesn't really address the root of the problem, which is that people need sort of on-demand information. And I think that leads to a lot of like app development stuff that we maybe don't want to get into, but maybe just wanted to note it that like revisions to instructions are only partly addressing what I think happens. And there's lots of other people on this call that have similar experiences. So maybe I don't know if that resonates with others, but it's something that kept coming to my mind as you were presenting.
Definitely agree. I think a couple thoughts that came to mind there is we had a like page dedicated on the dashboard for like frequently asked questions and that we had no idea what we were going to put there. Or I didn't really know what was going to go there. So maybe some of those things go there. I think the other one that I need to separate in my mind a bit, or at least for me, I need to separate, is what we instruct to the field team in terms of installation, and what do we instruct to the participants. For me, I keep blending those together, and I think that's a bit of a dangerous thing to do. I need to keep reminding myself that those are not the same audience. The commenting out the code is definitely the field team. There's a delay is the field team needs to communicate that, but we also need to communicate that to the participants in a different way. So it's, I think, a pretty complicated actual set of communications we need to do.
And I think there's actually a prep team that's preparing things to go to the field, and then a field team that's doing the installation, and then the participants. Because I wouldn't expect the field team to go look at the code. That should be as sent, right? But there might be some checks that one would do in the field at installation that would capture the response or lack of response.
So is the match test going to be done when it's installed at the participant homes? Or is that something that we've just been doing while we're testing it?
I think match tests would be best in home because I would test it. I tested them before, all with the same match test, but that's not accounting for like connectivity inside the home. And so that's just a different environment, the walls are a big thing. And so, yeah, I think match test in the home would be best. I think there's also other ways to do this instead of doing a match test, better ways that would be built into the system, such as just like having sort of maybe like a separate like setup dashboard where you press a button and it forces the filter to turn on to ensure that it's connected, or and then in terms of the outdoor unit connectivity, that's just seeing if it's changing on the outdoor section of the dashboard.
Okay. Because I was thinking when we're talking about explaining that delay to the participants.
Yeah.
If they're there, like this is something that I was thinking, like if what I would do is I would say, look, this is how that delay is going to look. So we're not only explaining it, but showing them that it's like, oh yeah, it is going to take however many minutes for it to kind of kick on. It's not going to be instantaneous while we explain why we don't want it to be instantaneous.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's a great idea because then it gives them Ellison pointed out that sometimes the information in a manual isn't recalled. I'm guessing that their experience of a match test would be recalled better than information from a manual.
I think too, when you talk about that time, I can't remember what you say, Carson, it's like 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
it's like, if I show you what 20 minutes is not the same time as you think about it's been 20 minutes. Because you're like, it's been 20 minutes. It's like, really, it's only been like 10. So I think
Yeah,
actually showing really, really helps people out with that.
yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe circling back around, Christian, you just mentioned there was that information tab that we had, and then we got rid of, so we never populated it. That's actually what Pi and I were talking about earlier today, mostly in response to the email that Tammy sent out. And yeah, we threw on the calendar, I think in June, because that was the next available time, to have like a working session of what people's gaps in knowledge of how the system operates. And then the thought was, is there something that we can have a takeaway and repopulate that information tab, or is it just like a hover over that little symbol in the top left that says if it's automatic or manual condition? It's like a 1 sentence description of how your system works. So we were thinking of along the same lines and actuating on that too.
Yeah, so this may be too much, but I would love to be able to just poke something and say, and have it say this, what it is, instead. I would not go read an FAQ. And I may be unrepresentative, but I am very lazy. And I forget not only what I read in the manual, but I forget that I have a manual.
Well, I think there's also, you're talking, Erica, about like a not only this, but like a what's this? Like it would pop up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's coming to my mind visually. I'm not saying that has to be in the UX, but that, like, for instance, AQI, if we go to Carson's earlier question about AQI or PM 2.5, I think we don't need to know what the majority think is easier, because I don't think there's an answer to that question. I think some people will know PM 2.5 and some people will know AQI better, and you'll never get the 100%, like, people want this. But if you had a what's this sort of pop up, it wouldn't, well, it may still matter, but it would matter maybe less because you could explain it on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to keep it really brief because yeah, people aren't gonna want to invest reading a lot of time, but they might have a basic question that would, equals, whether or not they actually want to engage with the interface, and keep it plugged in.
There's some questions in the chat, Carson. I don't know if you're able to follow that, or I can read them out if you don't have access to it.
It's kind of hard to find. Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. So Will's first question was, you mentioned there's a delay in when the fan will turn on, but what is determining when it turns off?
Oh, when it goes back to the baseline level for that day. So it takes a baseline every morning for that specific day, really early in the morning. And when an event turns on, it goes until that baseline is crossed again. So
Is there a time limit that it needs to be at the baseline before it will turn off, or does it just wait till it hits it and
No.
turns off?
once it hits baseline, I found that is sufficient for, because what we really don't want is that the reason I have it go all the way down to baseline instead of maybe above the threshold is in case the event drags on longer. But yeah, I found that once it hits baseline, that's pretty much that event is done. So
And then Danny asked a question, could we have a timer appear on the UX? Danny, do you want to expand on that? For what purpose was the timer that you're thinking of?
Absolutely. So what I was thinking in terms of this timer is in regards to the delay in the filter turning on. And so if we could have something on the user interface that, like, the resident expects it to turn on, it doesn't turn on, maybe they go over to the screen and they say, hey, why isn't this turning on? And it says, we've detected poor air quality. Filter turning on in 1959, 1958, and it counts down until that point. So we wouldn't even need an FAQ. They could just go over and they'd see that and they'd be like, oh, right, there's a delay. Or even if you have no experience in it, you can still come and say like, oh, there's a timer. It's going to turn on when this hits 0, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one thing we would need to be careful is that they wouldn't think it's for sure turning on in that time because like it could be a false event, right? It could be thinking it's going to turn on and then 5 minutes later it's false event. So, but yeah, I think that is a good idea. You could put something yeah, something along the lines, but phrase it so that it's not for sure. So the user doesn't think it's for sure turning on. But yeah, that's a good point.
I could see some value in an indication of, we see questionable air, we're monitoring it. We may be turning on.
I would totally look at that. Yeah. Thinking
Another
about
question-
protecting you, not doing it yet.
Another
Ben, go
question
ahead.
for you all about taking the baseline. How will we mitigate when we have like persistent poor air quality? So if we're in a wildfire smoke plume, we will, we'd expect that AQI, the amount of PM in our air, to be relatively consistent if we have that source upwind of us. How will we mitigate that? Like if, it turns on at 4 a.m. and it's like, oh, it's at 100. And then throughout the course of the day, it's like still at 100. And that's when we need the filter to turn on. Do we have any kind of thing that would turn it on, even if we're not at that threshold or if the threshold's really elevated?
Yeah, that's already in place on it. So there's a certain time as if the filter's on within, I think it takes the baseline at 5 a.m., maybe 6 a.m. And if the filter's on within a certain time of that, then it refers back to the previous baseline. So it doesn't take that baseline for the day. So that is already solved for. So
Yeah, it is a good question. So like from a longer term productization, this is one that we've like thought about or wrestled with a lot. So it's this weird balancing act of, do you err on the side of always leaving it on or not? I don't know what the right answer is. The publication Carson is working on right now kind of looks at that in some ways, like what is the threshold to turn on? How long do you delay? What's the dollar cost versus the health for the reduced concentrations inside the home? So he's doing the techno-economic modeling on that from the indoor model, and part of what Jordan's doing for his thesis is the same kind of concept from the pressurization. How much does it cost to run the different technologies? It's a non-intuitive cost kind of trade-off for some of these things, it turns out. Especially on peak electricity costs that just changed yesterday, if you weren't aware, in city forecasts.
So I would, eventually we will have a utility hookup. So it knows what price it is or not. I think these are interesting questions. Like I think this is far beyond the scope of this work, but somebody may be more interested in being protected at a lower setting, like if they have someone with asthma in their home. Right, so eventually there could be a dial with a cost bit or the choice. And this is really interesting, but we're not there yet. Like we got to solve the big problems first, or the apparent problems first. Will mentioned in the chat that he doesn't read the FAQ either. He wants He wants someone to answer his question, not somebody else's question. So there's that.
Um. Wait, so sorry, could you repeat that?
I think
I was just
well,
gonna-
correct me if I'm wrong. I think this was like a lighthearted response. Like if you had an FAQ a screen, then I wouldn't probably go there, seeing if my question was there. Did I read you right?
Yeah, I was joking in my agreement with you when you said you don't read the FAQs.
I do, but after like two of them, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, my question isn't first. I don't have time for this.
Exactly. Or these people are stupid. So, okay, a question that I have is I look at the screen more frequently than I think than you probably think I do, but I don't go to the history page. So, do you care about that? Like if the backlight went off, then you could see how many times I was looking at it, but it doesn't. So and I had thought that was a thing that you wanted to see how often people were looking at it. But I don't know if that is part of the goal here.
Yeah, I think that's more for the communications team, but I know we previously did have the discussion on the backlit thing, and we certainly can make it go black. And then they have to touch it, and then we would know they're looking at it. But the only thing about the backlit thing that I would come up with, or the black screen, is they might forget about it more if it's just sitting there black. Would be my only concern.
Could it be a time of day blackout? Like at night, it just blacks out and it's just dimmed during the day or something?
I think that would be possible to implement, but yeah.
There's probably some information out there about that sort of thing that Pi might have turned up, or that Pi already knows. Is Pi here? I thought he had been here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
I just
yeah.
yeah,
You
I
are.
just didn't hear the question properly.
Yeah, so my question is that, so we're talking about in engaging the user with a lit or an unlit an unlit screen so that you know when they're looking at it because they have to trigger it or tap it or something. And then the concern was that if it's if it is if it does not have a light, then you might forget about it because it's not as present in your visual field. Is that right, Carson?
Yeah. Yeah, and I just didn't implement the going black just because I think it was never decided on, so I just went on this side. But yeah.
Mhm. So I don't have
Correct me
an
if I'm
opinion,
wrong,
but I
I
will
think you
say,
have the function, right? I think it's
Yeah.
there, it's not turned on.
Yeah, we have the function for that, but yeah.
you would get more information from me if it wasn't backlit. I don't know if that's true of everyone, but I look at it, don't hit anything else, and then walk away, and you don't know that.
Hmm.
But Pi, there's got to be literature already on that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can definitely check it out. Nothing pops in my head at the time, at this moment, but yeah, I can check it out.
So Carson, what do you think is next? Besides you going to your fancy internship?
Yeah, I think definitely getting stuff ready to pass off. But I would say some of these things like the AQI versus PM, the backlit versus turning it off or dimming it, and the informations page I think should be decided on pretty quickly, so those things can be moved forward. Would be what I would say, so.
I mean, for the information page though, if we're not necessarily going into the field, in the true field for several months after your internship, could it wait till you return in the fall semester?
Yeah, for sure, it could wait.
Paul's hand is up.
So, yeah, so briefly on the AQI versus PM 2.5, I would vote for PM 2.5. That's what we're actually measuring. And I think to Ellison's point, a lot of people are going to prefer the other one, whichever one we choose. So let's choose the one that we're measuring. I'm more of a fan of that than AQI myself. So putting in the vote for the one I want to see on that side of the line. I'm wondering, I am definitely thinking a lot now about the handoffs to the field team. And that's part of why I want to get the contractor meeting on the books, is I feel like that's an important step in that. I don't know, Carson, whether you are available and whether you are authorized to be there at 3 o'clock on Monday to kind of hear where we might be going with that. Because I just feel like having both, kind of your side of the project and the field team all hearing all of the same things may help to facilitate how that goes. So if you are authorized to join and available to join, I would encourage you to join. And I also just want to put a plant a seed with kind of everybody on the tech team that my summer calendar is starting to fill up, and I am feeling like I want to, if people were available, perhaps sometime next week, or there might be a couple other days later in the month to get together and start talking about some of these handoffs to the field team and what things we might still be needing. I would appreciate an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, two pieces. Yeah, Carson should feel free to go to anything. I have the utmost faith in whatever choice he wants to make for those things. I think the tech team at this point should have a standing tech meeting. I think we're tires have hit the road and we're not in the car yet. So yes,
It's a good
fully
idea.
support
Very
you
good idea.
there, Paul. Let's talk. And I'm guessing our two schedules of the tech team are the most complicated. Maybe the two of us
Yeah.
can come up with something and
Sure, that sounds
go
good.
from there.
Is the meeting's at the powerhouse, right?
Yeah, in the area lab.
Okay, I think I have a class that ends at 2:50, so I might be 5 or 10 minutes late, if that's okay.
You're 5 or 10 minutes late is a lot more of you being there than not showing up at all. So I support that.
Sounds good.
So another thing I'm wondering is I've been feeling like it would be great to just have these units in people's houses throughout the summer and keep getting feedback, like different people. Now with Carson not being around to monitor that, I don't know if the feedback would go anywhere, but we could try that because I feel like we're learning a lot, and it would just be great to have that kind of learning continuing. So I don't know
fully
if that's excessive.
support that. And I have another student on another project who is doing something kind of tangentially related from a data standpoint. So I'm happy to have her run and collect the data. She's doing something completely different in terms of data, but it's a similar type of data. So we can just keep these things rotating and I'll put her in a vehicle and go grab data from time to time. But yeah,
and
I'm all for these things constantly running.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can also have people who are expected to be on the field team collecting the data because they're probably going to have to as well. And so that would be
Yeah.
good practice for them. My concern is just that there may not be anyone to look at it. But yeah, let's try to keep them in the field and have information continuing to come back.
Yeah, and Jordan might actually be a good one. So he'll be sticking around for some of the summer on on a early basis. And I think actually some of this data will be of similar dynamics and patterns to what he'll be interested in for his thesis. So it's probably of a pattern that will be of signatures that is interesting to him. So
Yeah, I got that. No problem.
Well, Carson, I think this is a big milestone, right? You got it in the field, you got feedback. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Feels good. And I think a lot of these issues aren't too big and can be solved pretty quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think Pi and Erica, Pi, I realize you're not here, but don't let your distance prevent you from asking for things. If they could be tested, your ideas are part of the team too. And as you're thinking about what to include from the feedback that you've gotten, if you have thoughts about what we could do or should explore, just say so and we'll try to figure out a way.
yeah, related to that,
Yeah, totally.
we were actually gonna have one of my students, the student is gonna be kind of backfilling from Carson from a assembly standpoint. Put one
Mhm.
together just to make sure everything is working. And my plan, if you're up for it, Pi, is I was gonna drop it in the mail for you so you can have a physical one
Ooh,
in front of you, if you're interested.
okay. Well, I think, yeah, that good work, Carson.
Thank
When
you.
do you become unavailable to us or much less available?
Yes, the internship starts May 27th. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, congratulations on that
Thank you. Yeah.
and looking forward to just going forward with and without you. Okay, anyone else? Last thoughts? Offers to maintain a Reddit thread? Okay.
Read a Reddit thread, yes, but only episodically and with very little consistency. But
No one stepping up as moderator? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Everyone.
Bye.